It is so funny how we treat decision making like this, like a complex math equation that just has to be solved.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've all been in that position, right?
Yeah, you have this massive life-altering choice staring you down. Like, maybe it's abandoning a stable career path or uprooting your family.
Or leaving a long-term relationship.
Exactly. And what is our default response? We grab a piece of paper, we draw a line straight down the middle, and we just agonizingly list out the pros and cons.
Because we are trying to engineer this fail-proof life. You look at the data, you consult your mentors, you ask your parents.
You look at the market trends.
Right, yeah, you gather all this external intelligence just to ensure that the choice you make is, like, bulletproof.
And the logic is usually flawless, right? The math adds up perfectly. So you make the safe, calculated choice.
You build the house according to the blueprint.
Yeah. And then you wake up 3 years later just staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m. and your heart is absolutely screaming at you that you were in the wrong place, like living the wrong life.
Wow, yeah.
The blueprint was perfect, but the house you built from it feels like a literal prison.
And that tension, between doing what makes absolute logical sense on paper and doing what your gut is just desperately pulling you toward that is the fundamental human struggle.
It really is.
And it is exactly what we are unpacking today. We are exploring a highly provocative philosophy on how we navigate choices.
Yeah, and this is brought to us by a master-level energy healer and advanced yoga and meditation teacher named Osman.
Right.
And I'll admit, when I first hear titles like, energy healer alongside concepts of major life decisions, my natural instinct is to put my guard up a bit.
Sure, you lean toward the practical.
I do. But what makes Osman's approach so incredibly fascinating is that he anchors these esoteric spiritual concepts in very recognizable, undeniable psychology.
He really does.
And we should probably state clearly up front, Osman himself emphasizes that his natural therapies and philosophies, they are not a substitute for licensed medical treatment.
Absolutely. Anyone dealing with physical or severe mental health conditions definitely needs to consult a qualified medical professional.
For sure.
But that disclaimer actually grounds his philosophy, I think, because he isn't claiming to, cure a broken leg with meditation.
Right.
He is addressing the spiritual and psychological mechanics of our lives. His core argument is that prioritizing the heart over logic, authority, and societal expectations, it isn't just some romantic movie script notion.
It's not just a rom-com trope.
No, not at all. It is a biological and spiritual necessity for human evolution.
Okay, let's unpack this, because Osman argues that our fundamental conditioning about how to make choices is actually the very thing setting us up for misery.
Yeah.
Society hands us this incredibly detailed GPS map the exact moment we are born. It highlights all the safe routes, the prestigious destinations.
All the little toll booths you need to pay at to be considered a successful adult.
Exactly.
And, society, our elders, academic institutions, they all champion logic and safety. And they do this out of a protective instinct, right?
Yeah, they mean well.
Right. Your parents don't want to see you struggle. They want you on the safest, most well-lit path possible.
But following that external GPS leads to people living in what Osman describes as a box.
The logical box.
Yeah. You spend decades following these general rules, ticking all the right boxes, and constructing a life that looks phenomenal from the outside.
And then you hit your mid-30s or 40s.
The classic midlife crisis.
Exactly. You look around at this logically constructed, perfectly safe life, and you ask yourself, why am I so incredibly miserable?
Why does simply getting through a Tuesday feel like lifting a boulder?
Right. And Osman's answer to that midlife crisis is remarkably blunt. He's like, of course you're miserable. You spent 3 decades ignoring your internal coding.
Wow.
You deferred to external authority instead of your intrinsic drive.
He gives this really great, fascinating example of a person who secretly, deep down, just wants to be a hippie.
Oh, I love this example.
Yeah, they want to live a free, unconventional, minimalist lifestyle. But they float the idea to their parents or their peers. And the immediate response is, well, that's ridiculous.
How will you save for retirement?
Right. That's not logical. It's not good for you. So what do? They suppress it.
Yeah, they put on the suit.
They put on the suit, they take the corporate job, and they just completely abandon the dream.
And the mechanism of that suppression is where the psychological damage actually occurs.
Tell me more about that.
Well, when you abandon that unconventional dream because an external authority convinced you it was wrong, you are letting society overwrite your internal operating system.
Wow. Yeah.
You are essentially making a life-altering decision based on someone else's comfort levels and their risk tolerance, not your own truth.
It makes me think, society hands us a detailed GPS map of where we should go, but the heart is a compass pointing to where we need to go.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
And if we just stare at the GPS, we end up at a destination we absolutely hate.
Which brings up Osman's rather controversial stance on what happens when you finally put the GPS down.
Right, because it's not always smooth sailing.
No, not at all. If you follow that internal compass, there's a very real chance you end up making a massive mistake.
You might start the business and it just utterly fails.
Or you move to the new city and realize you hate the weather. And logic tells us that this means you failed and you should have listened to the experts.
But Osman completely flips that script.
He really does.
From his perspective, making a mistake while genuinely following your heart isn't a failure in the traditional sense. It functions as like a necessary calibrator for your compass.
Yes, it is a learning experience you were required to go through.
Right, because if you felt an undeniable pull to pursue a certain path and it ended up crashing and burning,
You still had to go through the wreckage. You had to learn that specific lesson intrinsically through your own lived experience rather than just taking someone else's word for it.
because if you hadn't taken the leap, that pull would just keep gnawing at you.
Oh, forever.
You'd spend the next 40 years haunted by the what-ifs, slowly rotting inside that safe little box.
Exactly.
But this raises a mechanical question for me. If the pull of the heart is so incredibly powerful that suppressing it literally triggers a midlife crisis, where is that pull actually originating?
That is the big question.
Like, is it just a random passing whim? Because it feels so heavy.
Well, we have to shift from psychology to biology and spirituality here, specifically looking through the lens of what Osman calls the yoga sciences.
Okay, I'm with you.
According to this framework, we aren't just biological machines wandering around trying to pay bills and, stay comfortable.
Right.
The fundamental purpose of being here is to evolve.
Okay, I'll play the skeptic again for a second. Evolving as a person sounds great on a bumper sticker, but it's a bit abstract.
Fair enough.
How does this grand concept of human evolution connect to me desperately wanting to, quit my accounting job and open an animal sanctuary?
What's fascinating here is how Osman explains the origin of those specific overwhelming desires. He uses this concept of evolutionary memory, or genetic memory.
Okay.
He argues that we have deeply rooted wishes that were never taught to us. Nobody modeled them for us. Nobody encouraged them. Yet they are permanently embedded in our psyche.
See, when he introduces genetic memory, that is where my ears really perk up.
Okay.
So he's suggesting this isn't just a fleeting desire, it's an imperative written into my biology.
Yes. Think about it like epigenetics.
Oh, sure.
We already know from modern science that physical traits and even trauma responses can be passed down through generations in our DNA.
Right, the whole inherited trauma thing.
Exactly. Well, the yoga sciences propose that unfulfilled developmental drives are also passed down.
Wait, really?
Yeah, so your intense, inexplicable desire to break out of the corporate world might not just be your own whim.
Oh, wow.
It could be
Oh.
the culmination of 3 generations of suppressed independence in your family lineage trying to finally resolve itself through you.
That reframes everything. I mean, follow your heart is probably the most overused cliche in the English language.
Oh, for sure. It's on every coffee mug.
We put on greeting cards and inspirational posters, and it just loses all its weight.
Yeah.
But Osman shifts it from a cheesy platitude into a literal biological mandate.
Yes, it becomes a necessity.
It's not just about doing what feels nice on a Tuesday. It's about fulfilling the evolutionary memory encoded in your DNA so you and your lineage don't stagnate.
And it explains the sheer intensity of the misery people feel when they suppress it. You aren't just ignoring a fun hobby, you're actively stifling your biological and spiritual purpose. You're pausing human evolution.
Nah, that is heavy. But let me push back heavily here, though.
Go for it.
Because if someone listening to this deep dive adopts the mindset of, my desires are genetic imperatives and I absolutely must act on them to evolve, that could be incredibly dangerous.
Oh, it could be a disaster.
Right. What if my heart is telling me to do something reckless? What if my impulse is to gamble my life savings on a crypto whim or pursue a wildly destructive habit?
Well, Osman is hyper aware of that exact trap. He draws a massive, immovable line between a genuine evolutionary drive and a destructive ego-driven impulse.
Okay, so he's not advocating for chaos.
Not at all. He explicitly warns against using this philosophy as a free pass for blind recklessness.
Yeah, he mentioned some very stark examples in the material like highly addictive behaviors, drugs, alcohol, criminal activities, and reckless promiscuity, specifically noting health risks like contracting life-altering diseases.
Right, and he singles out drugs specifically to illustrate the mechanics of this danger.
How so?
He frames engaging with heavy narcotics as an irreversible gamble. It operates on a terrifying 50-50 chance.
A 50-50 chance. That is grim.
Yeah, you might arrogantly think you can handle it, that you'll be in the lucky fraction of people who experiment and walk away fine. But the reality is you have a 50-50 chance of completely annihilating your life and the lives of everyone around you.
It's like a door that just locks right behind you.
Exactly. And the reason he condemns these behaviors isn't just moralistic finger-wagging.
Right. It's not just drugs are bad.
No, it ties directly back to his core thesis of evolution. True evolution requires ultimate freedom. If you follow a dark impulse into addiction, you are doing the exact opposite of evolving. You are enslaving yourself to a chemical or a habit. You permanently lose the very agency and intrinsic control you're trying to assert in the first place.
You trade the societal box for a much smaller, much deadlier cage.
Beautifully said.
So, what does this all mean for you, the listener? How do we navigate this? How do we differentiate between the evolutionary pull of the compass and the destructive pull of an addiction or a terrible impulse?
Well, I think Osman's solution is very practical.
I would call it informed intuition. Like, your heart gets the final say, but your brain still has to conduct the rigorous risk assessment.
Yes, exactly. Osman advises that if your heart says an enthusiastic yes to a major life change, but the experts, the data, and the people who love you are screaming no, you absolutely cannot dismiss them blindly.
Right. You can't just be arrogant about it.
You have a profound responsibility to investigate exactly why they're saying no.
You have to do the homework.
Yes.
Gather the intelligence. Let's say you want to start a business in a terrible economy. The experts say it's financial suicide.
Right.
You don't just plug your ears and yell, my genetic memory demands it.
No, please don't do that.
You look at their data. You understand the specific risks. You calculate the worst-case scenario. And then if you realize the worst-case scenario is just being broke for a few years.
Right, not dead, not permanently enslaved to a substance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And your heart is still pulling you forward, then you make the leap.
It's about ensuring you can actually survive the failure if your compass leads you into a storm.
That makes a lot of sense.
As long as the worst-case scenario isn't life-threatening or creating irreversible harm to others, you are clear to proceed.
Okay, so doing your homework protects you from those reckless, fatal mistakes.
Right.
But let's say you do the research, you mitigate the catastrophic risks, you make the leap, and you start actively following that internal compass.
Okay.
The natural assumption is that life suddenly becomes a breeze, right? The clouds part, the sun shines, everything aligns.
Oh, wouldn't that be nice?
Right. But Osman argues the exact opposite. He says that doing this, especially when utilizing the tools of the yoga sciences, triggers a process called fast-forwarding your evolution.
Yes, and the consequences of that can be pretty brutal.
Tell me about it.
Well, if you just live a normal life and follow your heart occasionally, you will evolve naturally. It's a slow burn over decades.
Sure.
But when you actively adopt practices like advanced meditation and energy work, you are putting your foot on the accelerator of your own consciousness.
And speeding it up.
Massively. You begin processing emotional lessons, shedding outdated identities, and expanding your awareness at a blinding speed. You might live multiple lifetimes of psychological growth in just a few years.
And the casualties of that rapid growth are monumental. You end up outgrowing the life you currently inhabit long before society says you are supposed to.
Yeah, you really do.
Osman shares a deeply personal anecdote about his own career to illustrate how disruptive this is.
The medical school story.
Yes. He was enrolled in a medical university, and from the outside, this is the ultimate prize, right? He was on a guaranteed, bulletproof path to financial independence, societal prestige, and familial approval.
It was the gold standard logical box.
And he walked away from it.
Which is wild to think about.
His colleagues were appalled. They literally called it the most stupid decision a person could make.
I mean, you can imagine the sunk cost fallacy weighing on him.
Oh, for sure. The years of study, the tuition, the expectations. He even tried to force himself back into it, to give it another half-hearted bash, just to appease the logic. But his internal compass was screaming that the money and prestige would never bring him actual joy.
Walking away from a sunk cost of that magnitude requires a terrifying amount of trust in your intuition.
It really does.
But he made a promise to himself not to live with the regret of knowing he stayed in a cage for the sake of a paycheck. And decades later, he maintains he has absolutely zero regrets about leaving the medical field.
Well, losing a career path is tough, but the interpersonal casualties are where this philosophy gets genuinely heart-wrenching.
Yeah, this is the hardest part.
When your mind is expanding rapidly through these practices, you experience what we call shifting paradigms. Your fundamental view of reality, what you value, how you communicate, and what you need from a partner radically changes.
And Osman offers what he calls a money-back guarantee on this phenomenon.
Which is such a bold claim.
It is a startlingly confident claim for a spiritual teacher to make. He guarantees that if you are evolving rapidly through the yoga sciences and your life partner is not actively engaged in their own parallel growth, you will undeniably outgrow the relationship.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because it makes me think of it like a software update.
Okay, I like that.
You have completely upgraded your operating system. You are running new programs, processing data faster, and operating on a totally different frequency. But your partner is still running on the old hardware.
Right.
It's not that the old hardware is malicious or broken, right?
Right.
It's just that the two systems can literally no longer communicate. The compatibility has just gone.
That is a much more accurate way to look at it than assuming one person is somehow better than the other.
Exactly.
And Osman emphasizes that this isn't a sudden explosion. It happens gradually, year by year. You start drifting, you are expanding your parameters, and they are perfectly content staying exactly where they are.
And if the systems stay incompatible, the person who updated their software begins to feel an immense restriction. The relationship, which used to be a sanctuary, suddenly feels incredibly suffocating.
Because it requires them to power down their new operating system just to connect.
Wow. Yeah. And Osman backs this up with his own personal heartbreak. He doesn't just speak about this theoretically.
No, he's lived it.
He discusses two major relationships in his life, one that lasted 15 years and another that lasted 12 years.
That's a long time.
These were not casual flings. These were deeply entrenched, interconnected lives. And both of them ended because of this undeniable paradigm shift.
I can't imagine the pain of looking at someone you've spent 15 years with and realizing the compatibility is just evaporating.
Through no fault of either person.
Right. But what is most striking about his recounting of those breakups is the profound emotional maturity he displays.
Yeah, he wasn't bitter.
Not at all. He admits it was heartbreaking. He didn't want the relationships to end initially. But he stresses a vital ethical point in all of this.
What's that?
You cannot, under any circumstances, force another human being to grow. You cannot drag them into your new paradigm.
You can't force the hardware update on them.
Precisely. And just as fiercely as you must advocate for your own genetic memory and your own heart's desires, you must equally respect what the other person's heart dictates.
That is so true.
If their internal compass is perfectly content in the life you currently share, and they refuse to accelerate their evolution, you have to respect their autonomy. You have to accept the incompatibility and just let them go.
It paints a surprisingly lonely picture of rapid personal growth, doesn't it?
It really does.
If you are deeply committed to this path of fast-forwarding your evolution, it seems like you absolutely must find a partner who is either practicing the exact same methodology step for step, or someone who possesses an almost superhuman level of adaptability.
Yes.
Because if they aren't evolving with you, you are destined to just keep outgrowing them and leaving them behind.
It is a stark, lonely reality. But the alternative is infinitely worse.
How so?
The alternative is recognizing the software update is available, but refusing to install it so you don't upset your partner. You stay in the cage, you halt your own evolutionary biology, and you fast-track your way to that exact same miserable midlife crisis we started this entire conversation with.
Wow. We have covered some heavy transformative ground today on this deep dive.
We really have.
To synthesize this journey for you listening, we started by exposing the very real danger of living in the logical box.
Right.
How ignoring your internal compass for the sake of society's perfectly safe GPS map ultimately guarantees a life of deep, resentful unhappiness.
And we explored the incredible mechanism of genetic memory, the idea that your deepest, most inexplicable desires might actually be the inherited developmental drives of your ancestors, demanding that you push your lineage's evolution forward.
But we also grounded that in the reality of informed intuition. We learned the critical difference between the reckless, enslaving impulses of addiction and the genuinely liberating pull of the heart.
You have to do the risk assessment.
Always do the homework.
Always. And finally, we confronted the brutal casualties of fast-forwarding your evolution.
The shifting paradigms.
Right. If you put your foot on the gas pedal of personal growth, you must be prepared for the fallout. You will likely outgrow your established career, your previous identities, and most painfully, your long-term relationships as your paradigms shift beyond compatibility.
It requires an unbelievable amount of courage to dismantle a perfectly good life just because your compass tells you it's time to move.
Yeah.
Which leaves us with a lingering, difficult thought to chew on.
This raises an important question, I think. If following our true evolutionary path means we are destined to constantly outgrow our current lives, shed our past selves, and lovingly but firmly leave behind the people who cannot match our shifting paradigms,
Yeah.
is the ultimate goal of rapid personal evolution actually a state of profound, isolated independence? Or are we just burning down these perfectly constructed logical houses to clear the static, hoping to eventually stumble upon those incredibly rare people who are evolving at our exact same frequency?
Man, that is something you are going to have to sit with. Are we breaking the house down to be alone? Or are we clearing the plot to build something truer with someone else? Take a quiet moment today to check your own internal compass. Look at where it is pointing. And ask yourself, are you brave enough to put down the societal GPS long enough to actually follow it? Thank you for exploring these mechanics with us. We'll see you on the next deep dive.